Patience is often seen as one of the greatest virtues a man can possess. In relationships, many men start out calm, tolerant, and understanding. They listen carefully, they let things slide, and they give the benefit of the doubt. But over time, something begins to shift. The same men who were once admired for their composure suddenly find themselves snapping, raising their voice, or carrying an undercurrent of anger in almost every interaction. The question is, what happens in between? How do women, sometimes without even realizing it, transform patient men into angry men? It rarely begins with one big event. Most of the time, it's a series of small behaviors that accumulate slowly. A dismissive tone here, a sarcastic remark there. A man might overlook it once or twice, but when it becomes a pattern, frustration builds. Patience is not infinite. It's a resource, and when it's constantly tested, it runs dry. Many men report that their anger doesn't come from the problems themselves, but from the feeling of being unheard, unappreciated, or disrespected. Take, for example, the issue of nagging. Repetition can feel like criticism, even when the intent is simply to remind. If a man hears constantly that he is not doing enough or not doing it the right way, he begins to internalize the idea that nothing he does will ever be good enough. At first, he may smile and stay quiet, but inside, irritation brews. Over weeks, months, and years, that irritation becomes resentment, and resentment quickly finds its voice in anger. Another factor is inconsistency. Many men describe situations where expectations change suddenly. What was acceptable yesterday becomes a problem today. What was once praised is now criticized. This moving target creates confusion and instability, and when a man feels that the rules keep shifting, his natural response is defensiveness, which can easily turn into anger. There is also the issue of emotional manipulation. Silent treatment, guilt tripping, or exaggerated reactions can push even the calmest man to his breaking point. It's not always intentional, but these tactics erode trust and create a power struggle within the relationship. When communication turns into a battlefield, patience is the first casualty. It's important to note that this transformation is not about blaming women entirely. Relationships are a two-way street, and men also carry responsibility for how they manage their emotions. However, the dynamic often goes unnoticed until it's too late, until the patient man has already become the angry man. The real lesson is awareness. If women recognize the power their words and actions hold, and if men learn to set boundaries early, the cycle can be broken. A relationship thrives not on endless patience, but on mutual respect, consistent communication, and genuine appreciation. Anger is not inevitable. It's the result of patterns left unchecked. So, when we ask how patient men become angry men, the answer lies not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of many small ones. And the solution begins with both partners realizing that patience should be valued, not exploited. Now imagine this scenario. A man comes home after a long day of work. He's tired, but he's willing to help. He offers to do the dishes or take out the trash. Instead of appreciation, he hears, "Finally, you never do it right away." At first, he brushes it off, maybe even laughs and says nothing. But in his mind, the seed of resentment is planted. The next day, something similar happens. A small criticism, a sarcastic comment, or maybe just silence when he was expecting gratitude. Over weeks, these little moments add up. What was once a patient man begins to feel like an invisible man. This is how transformation begins, not with explosions, but with quiet erosion. The erosion of respect, the erosion of recognition, the erosion of the small gestures that keep love alive. And when those disappear, anger rushes in to fill the space. Another subtle but powerful trigger is comparison. When a woman constantly compares her partner to someone else, an ex, a friend, or even a fictional standard, she may not realize the damage it causes. Men are deeply wired to protect and provide, but when they feel they can never measure up, their patience doesn't just shrink, it collapses. The result is not motivation, but frustration, and that frustration shows up as anger. And here's the paradox. Most women don't set out to make their men angry. Often, they just want more attention, more effort, more connection. But the way it's expressed, through criticism, sarcasm, or comparison, creates the exact opposite. Instead of drawing him closer, it pushes him away. Instead of motivating him, it drains him. This dynamic reveals a powerful truth. Patience is not infinite, and when it's stretched too far, it doesn't bend, it breaks. And when it breaks, it rarely goes back to what it was. A man who has shifted into anger begins to see every situation through that lens. Even neutral comments feel like attacks. Even small requests feel like demands. Once the transformation happens, the relationship enters dangerous territory. But here's where hope comes in. Just as small negative actions can transform patience into anger, small positive actions can reverse the cycle. Respect, gratitude, and consistency are the antidotes. A simple thank you, a word of encouragement, or showing genuine appreciation can rebuild patience. When a man feels seen and valued, his natural calmness returns. The truth is, men don't want to be angry. Most men long to stay patient, supportive, and kind. But patience needs fuel, and that fuel comes from mutual respect. When both partners understand this, the transformation doesn't have to be from patience to anger. It can be from patience to love, from tolerance to trust, and from endurance to true partnership. So the real question is this: are we feeling patience or are we feeding anger? Because every word, every gesture, and every choice is shaping the man we live with tomorrow. Think about it for a moment. How many relationships start with warmth, laughter, and endless patience, only to end with silence, frustration, and anger? It doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually, almost invisibly, until one day both partners look at each other and wonder, what went wrong? The truth is, patience is often mistaken for weakness. A patient man is seen as someone who will always tolerate, who will always endure, who will always put up with it. And because of that perception, some women unintentionally push the limits, assuming that his patience has no end. But patience is not an endless well. It's more like a glass of water. Every criticism, every dismissal, every ungrateful remark is like a drop taken out of that glass. And eventually it runs dry. Let me ask you, have you ever noticed how anger in men rarely starts loud? It starts quiet. It starts with short answers. It starts with withdrawal, with longer silences, with a man spending more time on his phone, at work, or alone. That's the first sign that patience is fading. By the time anger shows up in words or actions, the process has already been going on for months or even years. Now, here's the interesting part. When men finally become angry, society often points a finger at them. Why is he so short-tempered? Why is he so irritable? Why can't he just calm down? But very few people ask, what led him there? What chain of events turned calmness into frustration? Blaming the outburst without understanding the buildup is like blaming a fire without asking who kept striking the matches. And this isn't about attacking women. It's about awareness. Because in most cases, women don't realize the impact their actions are having. They think it's just a joke, just a small comment, just a harmless comparison. But to a man who's been carrying these little weights day after day, it doesn't feel small at all. It feels heavy. Picture it this way. Imagine placing a single brick on someone's back. At first, it's manageable. Then add another brick and another and another. One day, the person collapses, not because of the last brick, but because of the accumulation of all the others. That's how patience breaks. The final straw looks dramatic, but the real story is in the slow buildup that no one noticed. And here's the most powerful takeaway. Anger doesn't just hurt men. It hurts the entire relationship. A man who feels constantly disrespected will not give his best. He won't feel motivated to love deeply, to serve, or to protect. Instead, he retreats. He becomes distant. And when distance enters a relationship, intimacy dies. So the challenge is clear. If women want patient men to remain patient, they must learn to nurture that patience with respect, gratitude, and consistency. A man who feels appreciated will always give more. A man who feels respected will always go further. And a man who feels truly valued will not only stay patient, he will become a stronger, more loving partner. Now ask yourself, in your relationship, are you building patience or are you draining it? Are your words lifting him up or are they slowly tearing him down? Because every interaction is a deposit or withdrawal. And the balance you create determines whether patience survives or anger takes over. One of the most overlooked truths in relationships is that men often don't express their frustrations right away. They hold it in. They stay quiet. They tell themselves, it's not worth arguing about, or she didn't mean it that way. And at first, this seems like strength. He's choosing peace over conflict. But over time, silence doesn't mean peace. Silence becomes pressure, and pressure always seeks release. When it finally comes out, it comes out as anger. Now, here's the irony. Many women are shocked when the anger finally shows up. They'll say, "Where is this coming from? You never complained before." But the truth is, he did complain, just not out loud. He complained in his mind. He complained in the way his patience thinned, in the way he pulled away emotionally, in the way his energy faded. The signs were always there. But because they were quiet signs, they were ignored. Let me share a simple example. Imagine a man who always makes time to help around the house. Maybe he fixes things, runs errands, or carries the heavier burdens. At first, his efforts are noticed, but slowly the appreciation fades. His actions are taken for granted. Instead of hearing, "Thank you," he hears, "Why didn't you do this sooner?" He swallows the comment once, twice, 10 times. But on the 11th time, something inside him breaks. He no longer sees the point of helping, and worse, he begins to associate helping with criticism. That is how patience becomes anger. This pattern doesn't just play out in marriages or long-term relationships. It happens in dating, in family dynamics, even in workplaces. A patient man in any environment can be transformed into an angry man if he constantly feels disrespected, dismissed, or undervalued. The principle is universal. Respect fuels patience, and lack of respect fuels anger. Now, let's flip the perspective for a moment. Imagine the same man, but this time, every effort he makes is met with acknowledgement. Not over-the-top praise, not exaggerated compliments, but simple recognition. "I appreciate that. That helps a lot. Thank you for doing this." Suddenly, his patience isn't being drained. It's being replenished. His calmness becomes stronger. His willingness to give grows. And his anger never has a reason to take root. The difference between a patient man and an angry man isn't in his nature. It's in the environment around him. And here's a thought that might surprise you. Anger in men is often not about control, but about loss. Loss of respect. Loss of appreciation. Loss of emotional connection. When men feel they're losing these things, their response is not sadness, it's frustration. That frustration, left unchecked, becomes anger. So what's the lesson? It's simple but powerful. Women hold the ability to either protect a man's patience or destroy it. And men hold the responsibility to set boundaries early so that their patience isn't mistaken for weakness. Both sides have work to do. A relationship cannot thrive if one partner constantly takes and the other constantly gives. It must be balanced, because when balance is lost, transformation happens, and not the kind anyone hopes for. So ask yourself again, in your daily interactions, are you planting seeds of peace or are you planting seeds of anger? Because whatever you plant, eventually you will harvest. Here's something few people ever stop to consider. Anger is rarely the root problem. It's the symptom. When you see a man explode in frustration, you're not seeing the beginning of the story. You're seeing the ending. The real story is in the months or years of quiet disappointments that came before. Think about it. A patient man doesn't turn angry overnight. He's not born short-tempered. Instead, he's slowly shaped into that state. And here's the crucial part. Most women don't even realize they're participating in that transformation. They believe their words are harmless, their tone is normal, or their criticism is constructive. But to the man on the receiving end, every little sting leaves a mark. Now, let's take a closer look at one of the most common hidden triggers: double standards. For example, a woman might expect her partner to listen attentively when she vents about her day, but when he tries to share his frustrations, she brushes it off with, "You're overreacting." That imbalance builds frustration. It sends a message: your feelings don't matter as much as mine. And once a man believes his emotions are consistently dismissed, anger becomes his only way to force acknowledgement. Here's another scenario. A man who values peace will often avoid conflict, even when something bothers him. But avoidance is not resolution, it's postponement. Every issue he swallows becomes another stone in his chest. He keeps carrying them until the weight is unbearable. Then, when the outburst comes, it shocks everyone around him. But the truth is, he's not exploding about one single incident. He's exploding about all the unspoken ones that piled up over time. The tragic irony is that many relationships could avoid this breakdown with just a little more awareness. Small shifts in communication make a massive difference. Imagine the same situations handled differently. Instead of criticism, appreciation. Instead of sarcasm, kindness. Instead of dismissal, active listening. These tiny adjustments would keep the man's patience intact, and anger would never have a chance to grow. But let's be honest, awareness is not enough by itself. Men also carry responsibility here. They must learn to communicate earlier, before patience runs out. Too many men confuse silence with strength, but silence is actually surrender. By staying quiet, they unintentionally allow disrespectful patterns to take root. Boundaries are not walls, they are guides. And when set with calmness and clarity, they protect both partners from drifting into toxic cycles. So, let's put it all together. How do patient men become angry men? The answer isn't a mystery. It's in the small dismissals, the lack of appreciation, the double standards, and the unspoken frustrations. But just as negative habits create anger, positive habits can preserve patience. Respect, gratitude, and consistency are the keys. Ask yourself, when was the last time you genuinely thanked your partner, not out of routine, but out of real appreciation? When was the last time you paused before criticizing and chose to acknowledge instead? These are not small gestures. They are investments. And a return on those investments is priceless. A relationship where patience doesn't run out, where anger never has to take over, and where both partners feel valued. So here's the final truth. A patient man doesn't want to be angry. He wants to stay calm, supportive, and loving. But patience is not a guarantee. It's a gift. And like any gift, it can either be cherished or wasted. The choice, in the end, belongs to both. There's a hidden truth about patience that many people never think about. Patience is not the absence of limits. It's the quiet endurance of them. And when those limits are crossed too many times, even the calmest man eventually breaks. Consider this. When women meet a patient man, they often admire his calmness. They love how he doesn't overreact, how he keeps his composure, how he makes them feel safe. But slowly, that very quality can become the reason they push boundaries. They think he won't mind. He'll let it go. He's strong enough to handle it. What starts as admiration slowly turns into exploitation. And that's when the transformation begins. Here's the paradox. Women don't usually push because they want anger. They push because they want reassurance. A sarcastic comment might be a disguised plea for attention. A comparison might be a clumsy attempt to spark improvement. But the method backfires. Instead of drawing him closer, it drives him away. Instead of inspiring effort, it creates resistance. Think about how men operate. When they feel respected, they naturally give more. Respect fuels energy. But when respect is missing, energy dies. The man who once went out his way to do small acts of love, bringing flowers, fixing things around the house, planning surprises, slowly stops. Not because he doesn't care, but because he feels his efforts are invisible. And when his efforts no longer matter, he begins to ask himself, why bother? That question is the seed of anger. Now, let's look at one of the deepest triggers of all, constant testing. Some women believe testing a man's patience proves his strength. They might push his buttons to see how much he can take, or withhold affection to measure his reaction. But testing isn't proof of love. It's proof of insecurity. And when insecurity becomes a foundation of a relationship, patience doesn't stand a chance. A man who feels constantly tested eventually stops playing the game. His patience wears thin, and anger becomes the only answer. Another dimension is public disrespect. A man can endure criticism at home, but when he feels belittled in front of friends, family, or colleagues, the wound cuts deeper. Public humiliation turns private patience into public anger. Why? Because men are wired to protect their dignity. Take away dignity. and you awaken a version of him you may not recognize. And yet, here's the irony. Many women are surprised when their patient partner finally snaps. They say, "You've changed. You used to be so calm." But the truth is, he didn't change. He adapted. He adjusted to an environment where patience was no longer valued, and anger was the only tool left to be heard. This is where we must pause and ask, is anger inevitable? The answer is no. Just as negative actions can create anger, positive actions can preserve patience. It's all about the daily choices. Think of patience as a garden. If you water it with respect, appreciation, and kindness, it grows strong. But if you neglect it, if you step on it with criticism, sarcasm, and indifference, it withers. And when it withers, weeds of anger take over. The health of that garden depends on consistent care from both partners. So let me ask you, the listener, what kind of garden are you growing in your relationship? Are you watering patience? Or are you letting anger take root? Are you protecting your partner's calmness? Or are you slowly eroding it with small, careless acts? Because here's the ultimate reality. Patient men are not endless wells of calm. They are human beings with breaking points. And when they break, the relationship breaks with them. Boo.